Well, this is Lord Parekh. And
Okay.
you know Rumi you met him in London.
Yes,
He
we did.
hosted
We
you.
met
That's
Lord Parekh also shortly, I think, for a short time. Yes.
and Lord Dholakia.
We haven't met. It's nice meeting you, sir.
Yes.
And Anita Goel and Sunita Arora.
We haven't met, but it's very nice meeting you. Thank you for
You
being
too.
here.
Rumi, where
I
are
think
you?
we are in your hands now.
In my hands,
Yes.
in that case, I think we might start.
Yes, please.
Now that all of us are here. Well, first of all, let me begin by thanking everybody for coming. And let me introduce people very briefly, in case any of them is unfamiliar, the audience who has been listening to us. There is, start with is Lord Virgin, who made his fortune in Uganda and established a reputation there. He then came here and has been running or has launched this Gavino Piazza chain in UK, and he until recently owned the upmarket Thomas Good Emporium. His property portfolio is in several countries, and he established Rumi Foundation, which supports educational and other charitable activities. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
Just below Mohini is Lord Dholakia, who is an old friend. I think he and I go back 40 years, or even longer, in the field of race relations. And in the field of race relations in particular, I can hardly think of anybody from either the white community or the black and brown community who has done as much work as Navneet has. And he used to work at the Commission for Racial Equality when I was its deputy chairman, and his services, his impact were widely admired. He then, of course, moved into politics. Not that he was out of politics then altogether, but he became deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats within the House of Lords, where he enjoyed very considerable reputation for his impartiality and wisdom. Just above that is Mohini. I don't think she needs any introduction, but in case some of you are wondering why she's interloping on this event, Mohini, the reason is she is the author, filmmaker, charity worker, journalist, name it. She has worked for the BBC Radio. She's the founder of Lily Foundation, which has been campaigning against human trafficking and children in slavery. She is also the author of award-winning play, Rumi, Unveil the Sun, which is co-written with her mother. Then I found deeply moving, and that this is extraordinary. I haven't seen a book which mother and daughter have written. I have seen father and son in the history of philosophy, but never mother and daughter. She has also written award-winning plays and films, and two of her films which made particular impact. One was Ramayana, and the other was Kari Tiffin, which is history of India as seen through the medium of food. Well, next to Mohini is Anita Goel, whom all of you would know, very distinguished member of the Indian community, involved in all kinds of charitable activities, and also a supporter of Lily Foundation. I'm sorry, I'm looking through all this, so many things about so many people. And she's CEO of Hemraj Goel Foundation, where she and her husband has been actively supporting charitable causes. Welcome. I have already introduced Lord Rosie. Above him, and I say above him physically, not otherwise, is Sunita Arora, who runs her own business, as well as being director of a highly successful Aurora group of hotels, co-founder of the Aurora Charity Foundation, And she has raised millions, I'm told, for worthwhile causes, including Lily and UNESCO. And finally, of course, I come to Sri M. What do I say about him? If you look at Google, you will find a lot of entries, but Sir M is yogi, but not a sannyasi. A sannyasi is one who renounces the world. Yogi is one who has already renounced it spiritually without being disturbed by his connections with the world. So he's a yogi, but not a sannyasi. He founded satsang. He's associated, and this is one connection I have with him, with Krishnamurti Foundation, whom I followed for 15 years when I was a young undergraduate at the University of Bombay and listened to his lectures with great attention. He also, by here I mean Sri M, also has written his autobiography, which is titled Apprenticed to Himalayan Master. And it's very interesting. At a very young age, this young boy was fascinated by the mysteries of the universe, birth, rebirth, and disappeared. Disappeared into the Himalayas. Only he knows what he did. After a few years, he appeared. His mother had given him up for dead. His mother was absolutely surprised to see the young man now fully fashioned into a yogi. I think there's an extraordinary commitment to the life of the mind, or the life, I should say, life of the spirit. He is a disciple of Maharaj Raj Babaji, and more interestingly, he was awarded Padma Bhushan by the government of India a few years ago. So welcome you all. I have said enough about all of you. I have nothing to say about myself. I'll now move on to the event of the day, which is we are celebrating the birth of a book. And that's a big event for the author and for the audience. And this is an interesting book because this is a book in which eminent writers, journalists, philosophers, politicians write letters to their mothers. In some cases, the mothers are dead. And the letter takes the form of an obituary. In other cases, mothers are old and frail, but still around and active, able to read the letter and fight back if the letter is discarded. So you have this fascinating collection of letters with different kinds of audiences in mind. And since this is the first time that a book like this has been written, there is no template. When I was asked to write, and I did, I wrote whatever I wanted to. I'm sure Dr. Burji, but lots of other people wrote whatever came to your mind, because there is no template which says, say something about your childhood, say something about critical about your mother. With the result that it displays a wide variety of genres. And that, I think, makes it most interesting. And it's also, I think, very striking that precisely because it is not condensed or molded into a particular mold, it allows the spirit of the writer to express itself fully, the way he wants to. So you read Amitabh Bachchan, and he writes it in his own way. You read somebody else, I can't name, Cliff Richard. Or you read someone like Sharmila Tagore. Mohini will tell us about it. You get a very different spirit. So what you have is a vignette of people writing about it. And I think the last point I want to make, and then I can shut up, is why mother? Why letters to mother? Why not letters to father? Just as important. In fact, it becomes an inspiration for people. I was talking to my grandson, and I said, look, why don't you write a book using your father's name or grandfather's name? Write a book, letters to my friends. Who is your best friend? Why is your best friend? What has it done for you? Why don't you get him to write? Get 50 of your pals from the class and get them to write. For best teacher.
The program,
Was Jane McDonald's, Cruising with Jane McDonald.
where was she?
She was on a boat, Viking boat, up the going up the Baltic Sea.
But what was the place? Leningrad.
Leningrad.
No, but the other name for it.
It used to be called.
What happened here? I think we are.
It's called.
So, sorry, I couldn't hear what was being said.
Navneet, I think you meant to mute yourself then, but you didn't.
Can you hear?
I think you turned off the visual rather than the sound.
Yeah.
Now, can we hear? I have my colleague with me to monitor the machine in case his assistance becomes necessary. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, hear me now. No, the last point I was making was why a book addressed containing letters to your mother, not to father, not to brother, not to a friend. And that's because I think that every relationship has a peculiar logic, a peculiar texture, peculiar feel. And a mother-child relationship has a certain flavor which no other relationship has. It is a relationship in which there is a total dependency. A little child you carry within you for several months. And during that period, whatever you do affects the child. You can kill the child, or you can let the child survive. Even after the child is born, if you are thinking of a relationship of total dependency, absolute power, but anything you do, even a tyrant doesn't have that kind of power. Even Stalin would never be able to do that, which is you, by a sheer act of negligence or volition, can stifle or sustain someone's life. Now that's an extraordinary relationship that you have with your mother. And in addition to that, if there is time, one could of course explore how this relationship has a rational but also an instinctual basis. So look at the animal world. A leopard, I mean, I see David Attenborough's programs, where a mother has given birth to litters and she has no difficulty recognizing who they are. And how she looks out for it. How is this maternal instinct played out? And why does it have an internal cognitive capacity? So all these are fascinating things about mother-child relationship. And I'm glad that Mohini has done this. She has set a pattern for other books of this kind. And I hope that one day there may be another book on relations to your fathers or friends, God knows. Maybe letters to God. That is the thing a friend suggested to me. Letter to God complaining to him, why did you design human beings in this way? You could have put eyes at the back. You could have put nose in the front. Lots of advice that one could give to the Almighty Himself. Well, in the presence of Sri Am, I think this is something worth thinking about. On that note, I stop and I invite Mohini briefly to speak to the book and introduce it.
Right. I've been asked to put the book into context as to why and how it came about. And I remember, Bhikkhu Bhai, we were having tea in the Pugin room at the House of Lords when I discussed this idea with you, and you were very encouraging. You told me it's the best idea I've ever had. So I went off and got to work, but it took 10 times as much work as I expected. And it took 3 years. And why did I focus on mothers? Well, I think everyone here knows about our charity, Lily Against Human Trafficking, and it's named after a 4-year-old girl who was sold for 5,000 rupees to a pimp who brought her to Delhi from Hyderabad, sold her for 1 lakh rupees. So, I mean, that's a huge profit. And some years, well, she was rescued by a project and she grew up in a shelter home and she was educated. And some years back, when she was about 18, I asked her, I said, now you're grown up and what do you want to do in your life? And she burst into tears and she wept for hours. And she said, my ambition is to teach mothers to love their children. Because you see, it was her mother who had sold her for 5,000 rupees because she was a prostitute. She needed the money for drugs. Now, so this little girl was, this was the ultimate betrayal for her. My own mother, in stark contrast to Lily's mother, gave us a golden childhood. And she was fun-loving. She was always smiling. She used to sit with us and watch slapstick comedies and, Laurel and Hardy. And she laughed so heartily that you could hear her out in the garden. And she was a scholar of Sikhism. She wrote over 50 plays. She used to sing. She made a record with HMV. She sang on stage because she's trained in classical music. And her degree was in European history. And she had no interest in shopping or collecting any material things. And I just took her for granted because I thought all mothers were like this. And she died 2 years ago. And I regret that I did not always tell her how much I loved her and cherished her. And my letter to her in the book is also an opportunity to express, some of these feelings. And, feelings for one's mother come straight from the heart, no matter how rich one is, or how important one is, or indeed how old one is. So something about one of the letters that I received, and I did wonder what people were going to write. So Sir John Standing, who's a very famous British actor, and he's written that, fancy having to write to you at this stage of my life, as I'm older than God. And, there were different reactions. And when I asked people to write personal letters, some welcomed it. And Mr. P Singh and Lord Paul thanked me for this opportunity. The actor Arshad Warsi writes, he said, this is the first time I'm writing to you, and that too when you're long gone. And it's surprising how many people never ever wrote a single letter to their mother. Kiran Mazumdar Shaw writes that her mother gave her the moral and emotional strength to build Biocon into the pharmaceutical giant that it is today. And Cliff Richard, who's written a very moving letter, and he said that, I think he said that you who I can never forget and will always love. And, he was born in Lucknow, and he spent the first early years of his childhood in India, like Kipling. And then the family moved in 1947 to England, where times were hard. And he has written very frankly about it in his letter. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi writes that mother is the ever-flourishing spring of inspiration and a strength to overcome all challenges. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who's, of course, an apostle of compassion, and he says, my mother was the first teacher of compassion, which is why I believe we first learn about loving kindness at home. So really, mother is the first guru, and that is my theme. And my own mother taught me to be intellectually curious and to explore, many different avenues of self-expression. And she was very generous, and she taught me not to seek revenge, never to, but leave others to their own karma. So, some people declined my invitation because they could think of nothing nice to say about their mother. There are other letters in the book that speak about difficult childhood and lack of affection from mothers. And then, of course, there are some heartbreaking letters from girls from our projects and their letters, talk about betrayal and abandonment and being sold and all sorts of dreadful things being done by the one adult who should have protected them at all cost. So this kernel of this idea came from my work with anti-trafficking, which I've been doing for about 16 years. And it's a horrible business, buying and selling human beings. And of course, more women than men. And so we work, of course, to try and give them some equal opportunities. And Bhikkhu Bayu and Rumi, Sunita, Anita, everyone has been benefactors and team members of Lily. And your help has reached about 300,000 people. And the title of the book just came from the opening of a letter, Dear Mama. And I hope the book will touch hearts and it will, engender some compassion for these girls and women who are in very difficult circumstances. Because I think the pandemic has also shown us that we are interdependent.
Right, well, thank you very much. Are you stopping there?
Yes, I think I will.
Thank you. Well, we have in all about 75 minutes for the program, of which we have taken up 20 so far. So we have got about 55 minutes left, of which 40 minutes I thought should be given to the panelists and about 15 for comments and questions from the floor. So bearing that in mind, I would be more than happy for any one of you to a kickoff with some general comments on your own piece or on the general questions that Mohini has raised. Who would like to start? Navneet?
Can I start? Can I first of all congratulate Mohini for this excellent publication, something that's been lacking in our sort of library, and I think this would be a tremendous joy for other people to read how they relate to their particular mother. In my case, I was watching a television program last night, which was about Jane MacDonald cruising across different parts of the world. And she came along to Petersburg and went along to a dolls museum. Remember the Russian dolls? Dolls inside dolls inside dolls. And I was looking at this particular program because I'd been to the same museum some years ago in Petersburg. And what I noticed and what she noticed, that every one of these dolls had a face of a woman on it. There was not a single man anywhere at all. And these dolls were in values from over 5,000 pounds to peanuts sort of thing. And when she questioned as to why the women's face on these dolls, she was told by the curator that mother is at the center of everything that we do. And it's the center of the family. And that is why that is represented. You will never see a man's face. You'll always see a woman's face. In my case, I have a difficulty here that I could not pen a letter to my mother because, as I said in the publication, that she could not read or write. So it was very difficult to explain to her in writing what one felt whenever I was away from her. But one thing I always say to people, it's become a humor in a way, that I was very close when I was born to my mother. And the reason is basically very straightforward. Father earned the money, mother was the chancellor of the exchequer. Although she could not read or write, she had the total command of how the money was going to be spent and who will receive what, and literally account for every expenditure in the house. That amazed me at that particular age, because I was sort of saying that she couldn't even sort of read or write, and yet she's able to demonstrate very clearly her skills in running a family. The one other thing that I want to mention here, and I think Rumi probably will back me up on this one. I was born in Tanzania, East Africa. There were no radios, no newspapers, no television at all in those days. All we had was the paraffin lamp, which she used to light at about 6 o'clock in the evening. We used to sit around it and read our book and our lesson, etc. And almost everything that I did in my life, I've always treasured. And one of the most valuable things that I have of my mother, when she died, I kept her passport, and what it indicates, where they said they want the signature of my mother on her passport, she has a thumbprint on that one. And to me, that thumbprint is one of the most valuable things that I always treasure in my life. Thank you.
Very good. Very, very moving, Navneet. Very moving. Lord Burji.
Well, thank you. First of all, I want to just echo, thank you, Mohini, for the wonderful work. And I know how much work you put into this and how much effort you did. And, let's not forget, this is about supporting Lily and the charity that you do so much to help people. And, I think probably for all of us on this call and for the audience, it's hard to imagine a mother who is not an angel and who doesn't nurture you and love you. And yet, even in my own experiences, some of my friends who we've talked about, who their mothers didn't love them for whatever reasons. And, the harrowing story of Lily and the common story, I found, to be honest, I found it quite difficult to relate to. In your book, you mention a number of $100 billion is the amount of money spent on human trafficking in the world. And, when you try and digest that number, it's a frightening number. But, I was fortunate to have a very loving mother. My birth, I'm the youngest of three sons, but, our birth was a miracle. I don't normally publicly talk about this, but at the time of my parents' wedding, we had a family tragedy and we lost 14 members of our family in a bus accident that went on a ferry and into the sea. So this was on the exact time of my parents' wedding, my mother's wedding day. And she was in a coma for 6 months. So having a child, I'm the youngest, as I said, but having my eldest brother was a miracle. And the power of that lady to give birth and to nurture 3 young children is something we never talked about. It was never talked about in our family. The family tragedy. It was something you didn't talk about. Of course, it was felt and prevalent throughout generations, even today. But in those days, you didn't really talk about your emotions. You didn't think about therapy, especially for a woman. But I think the trauma that someone like that must have gone through, a young girl coming into a family, and then and a very prominent family, and then this tragedy happening to the family. But that is where one gets one's inner strength and your value system, I think. So for me, my value system came, I think, from my mother, one of compassion, of understanding. So I think everyone, we're very lucky to have loving mothers, but and it's hard. When I first came across a friend of mine who talked about the opposite, how he didn't talk to his mother, how his mother was jealous of him. It's hard to understand that. But I was very touched by what you said, Lord Parekh, and I think the lesson we learned from mothers is the concept of infinite power. And I think there is so much to learn from the concept of power. And I think a mother can teach us that power doesn't have to be. The power can be used in a compassionate way. It doesn't have to be used in the way that sometimes it's used in the world. And I think I find that a very interesting concept. When you think about it, you have ultimate power as a mother. And for me, again, personally, when my mother was dying with cancer, she said to me, "You are my mother, and you're a father, and you're my father." And it's interesting how, again, that concept of total power, the role reversal was there. I then had total power over her and her upbringing. And of course, you use that power in a compassionate way. So thanks, Mohini, for what you do. And thanks for highlighting the plight of so many people who we don't see every day and we don't experience. So, what you do with Lily is fantastic, and very happy to continue supporting you.
Well, that was a very moving account and very disturbing in some ways. Thank you. Anila, go on. How about you?
Hi. Sorry. Yes. First of all, would you like me to speak and share?
Of course, in sequence.
Absolutely. Thank you. But this is amazing to be on this panel with such incredible stories to hear. Mohini, I'm so grateful that you've included me in your book, because it's a fabulous book. I was flicking through it yesterday, and each time I read it, I'm so inspired by the stories, the powerful messages, and the wisdom that's being shared. And, congratulations for this book. This is a wonderful way to launch the book right now in the way that we are in lockdown and in the pandemic. And I wish you all the success with getting as many sales as possible, because this is for fundraising for Lily Against Human Trafficking, which, when I met you in 2014, you really touched me by Lily's story. And I had no idea that this happened to girls, even to women. And for me, that explains my childhood, because I was raised by a very loving mother. I was very fortunate that my mum was only 19 when she had me. She was young. She came to Britain in the 1970s, all the way from Punjab, hence my passion and love for Punjab. And she came to this country with big dreams and desires and hopes. And when she hit the shores of the UK, life was very different here, and she had lots of differing family values and family dynamics, lots of gender inequalities. She was young, she had a different perspective on life, and she had to endure and learn a lot along the way. And I think one of the biggest things is my mum was always a leader. She was married to my dad, who is the third brother, and she had to learn how to adapt in a family life that was so different to hers. But, you know, she was a leader. She was the first woman to learn to drive on her street, in fact, a Punjabi community at the time. And she inspired many other women to ask their mother-in-laws that, you know, can I also learn to drive a car? She went on eventually to study in London College of Fashion to follow her dream of becoming a beauty therapist. And she's done many, many courses. In fact, her passion for learning so many different skills and so many different talents, she's multi-talented. You know, she has this wonderful entrepreneurial spirit, which I think has really influenced my younger sister and my brother. And, you know, I have great gratitude for my mother, for the values that she's instilled in me, her guidance, her support, her influence, her friendship, because my mother has supported me through some very difficult and challenging times in my life. I was only 38 years old when I lost my first husband, and she was there for me every moment, every single moment, to soften my pain, my sorrow, and to soothe me through my troubled times in everything that I have grown up with. And she's my magical mother, I call her. She's incredible because she cheers me on and champions me and celebrates all of my successes now. And for that, I'm hugely, hugely grateful. So I was raised in East London in a place called Forest Gate. And when I was talking to Mohini about this, when I shared my story for the book, Mohini, you shared with me that you knew Forest Gate really well. And the link so powerful, it was amazing. I couldn't believe it because this man also had an influence in my life. His name was Lord Pandit Narenji at the time, as I knew him by. And my mother would often visit Pandit Narenji to understand his philosophy. And he was a really good, powerful guide in her life at the time. And I remember having an argument with my mum that I did not want to study science A-levels. I wanted to do social work, and I wanted to study the humanities and the arts. And Pandit Narenji influenced her in such a wonderful way. He said, bring Anita to me so I can help her to understand her future and to support her, to support you in your pain that you're having with her right now. And I went along, and he really did change my life. He got me to understand that this is a really good pathway to study the sciences. Well, lo and behold, I went on to university to study engineering. I listened to my mum. I understood that she was guiding me out of love, and I went on to become a science teacher. But, you know, out of all of that, you know, looking at the family values and everything that she's done, I have watched her and I've learned so much from her. And now I'm in a family now. It's a blended family where I have 3 children, of which I have only given birth to 1. And I have seen my own nanny also take care of family where she has 5 children and she only gave birth 3. And I have learned the values through the generations that have been passed down on how to embrace family life, how to look after your mother-in-law, how to respect your family and everybody within that family unit, through serving meals, through embracing everybody that comes to your home, to enjoy that and to really serve others and contribute to so much in your life. And, you know, seeing the charity work, that has opened up a different side of me. And, you know, I'm so lucky, I think, to have a great loving mother, because I have instilled all of those things in my life today. And, you know, I also believe we don't just have one mother, we have many, many mothers in our lives. And the many mothers are our amazing mentors that help us to give back to others and to serve the communities and to serve our own families with a really big open heart. And so I'm just so grateful for those many mothers who have influenced me in my life and given me so much to share with the world now today, especially with Lily Against Human Trafficking. And you know, when I've got 2 daughters, and when I heard the stories, I was heartbroken that this happened. And I knew from that day in 2014, over the last 6 years, that I have to keep on supporting this amazing charity. So I urge everybody to go on Amazon, to buy this book, and to do your part for this charity. So thank you very much for honoring me today, Mohini, and everybody else.
Thank you for voice from Punjab.
Thank
Shri
you.
M. Shri M.
Can I say, Bhikkhu Bhai, we don't really have questions because we don't have audience participation. So I request Shri M to, enlighten us.
Right. There are no questions.
No, because we don't have audience participation.
Yeah, but I thought there were some questions given to us in advance. Hasn't somebody
We can
given
address. Those we can address. Anyway, we'll listen to Shri M now.
Yes, of course, yeah. And he will be followed by Savita. Sriram, Shri M.
So, thank you very much for inviting me to this, I wouldn't call it a conference, a get-together of like-minded people, and especially Mohini for making me part of this distinguished group of people who are here. Well, I haven't personally achieved much in this world because my idea when I started off was running away from this world. Well, I had to come back, bang, after a lot of experiences. But my idea was quite different, to get out and learn about that which is not of this world perhaps, and which has a link with this world. And in this venture, I have written this in Mohini's book, Dear Mama. I must say, I have seen how fond she was of her own mother. I've seen it. I've seen it while I talk to her, when I visit her in London, even when she's everywhere. I actually had the chance of meeting her mother once when she was very ill and could hardly talk. But in that state of pain and discomfort, there was a smile on her face when she welcomed a new guest into the house. So I guess what she could have been when she was all right and walking around. Well, I can only say that without my mother's support, I could not have done what I did. Look, I was born in a emigrant Pathan family in the south of India, 4th generation. And my interest was yoga, meditation, Vedanta, which is unusual and difficult for people to accept from a particular background. But so at the age of 19, I just broke what I call the golden cage, where we were well looked after. My father's only regret was that I didn't pick up his construction business. And I was the only son and I'm the eldest son. You know, in India there's this thing about the only son and eldest son and so on and so forth. I had 2 sisters, of course. One of them was very studious, so she became an Indian Administrative Service officer, which means she was studying when I was meditating. Let's put it this way. So anyway, so at the age of 19, I broke free from what I thought was my conditioning and pushed off to the Himalayas, where of course, if you read my autobiography, I found my master Maheshwarnath, and then I lived with him many places in the Himalayas, which even now are not probably on the tourist circuit. And then he said, go back. And the first time he told me to go back was when he asked me, have you written a letter to your mother after 3.5 years? I said, no. Why? He said, because if I write, I'm sure they'll come somehow take me away. He said, you have to go back anyway. You know, those days when I was wandering with him, I had long hair, thick hair, which was tied up into a matted haired kind of hair style. And I used to wear those, he was from the Nath Sampradaya, so we had those rings to wear. So first thing he said was, take out your rings and put them in the Ganga. He sent me to a decent barber in Rishikesh and said, get your hair cut. I said, Babaji, I was kind of valuing this thing, like something wonderful. Cut it off. I said, but why all this? He said, because you're going back to see your mother and she's already in a terrible state. She used to dote on me, she always did. So, and she protected me from other people who criticized my meditation and things like that. He said, go back, because if she sees you like this, she'll probably have a heart attack, cardiac arrest. So go normal. He got me a pair of pants from Delhi from someone he knew and shirt and so on, and then I went back. Well, my mother couldn't believe that she saw me, although she hoped that she would see me. And well, there were some emotional moments and so on. And then what I'm trying to say is that even after that, after having done something which would appear to be terrible, to leave a mother who loves you so much and you're the only son, and then run away to the Himalayas and come back, I would say that she did not in any way regret or was unhappy that I had done something terrible according to usual relationship rules and regulations. So she was a very understanding mother. So this idea of the mother, I know there are mothers who, like this Mohiniji's Lily Foundation, how it started when she saw some mother sell her child and so on. There may be such mothers. But I would still say that in a woman, the feeling of motherhood is there. If it's either manifest or potential, hidden, it is there. This lady must have done for some compulsion which I cannot understand myself, but I also sympathize with her in some way. Not for selling away the child, but there must be something terrible that has happened by which she could do such a terrible thing. Because the mother is, as as Lord Parekh said, is the one who is most linked to the child. 10 months we are in the womb, male or female, we are in the womb, and all nutrition comes from the mother. Everything comes from mother. As he said, yes, in a way, she dictates everything that happens to us. She can get rid of us if she wants. I don't think any mother in a right mind would do that. But this concept of the mother, from my understanding, is a very ancient concept in India, at least in India. Well, we call our country motherland. We don't call fatherland. I'm not saying father is not important, but the mother. See, this 10 months that you are in the womb establishes a very intimate connection with the mother, which even if you think you're free, you've got moksha, you've got nirvana, somewhere in the brain it's still there. You can't totally take, I'm not saying you should, but it's there. So and in India, the entire creation is supposed to have started from a primordial energy who is called Parashakti, which is a mother, the eternal mother, the supreme mother. So when I see people ill-treat women in India, I don't understand why they have forgotten their ancient culture. What's going on? It just can't happen. Greatest of saints in India have worshipped women. Not only the mothers, but also the goddess, and so on. So I have written a little note, a small one chapter for Lady Mohini's dear mama, and I think you're doing a fine work with the Lily Charity Foundation, and this book is sure to reach many people, and I think it's one of the best things that you have done. Like Lord Parekh told you, you said, it's one of the best things you have done. I've seen your other books, of course, they are quite interesting and so on. But this is important for people to read and understand how people think of their own mothers and the whole idea of what mother is. It's not just their own mothers. It's the whole idea of motherhood, which is so important to nurture and bring up someone. I think when I feel kind to somebody, which I always do mostly, I feel this was a quality that was given to me by my mother. Probably I inherited it because she was a kind soul. I was listening to Anita Goel and talking about her mother. That was a very sentimental and emotional, deeply emotional description of her mother. As far as Mohini is concerned, I've seen her. I think she still hasn't recovered from having physically lost her mother. It's difficult to say. So even though, why I'm trying to say this contrast, even though I left my mother, my family, and ran away at the age of 19 to the Himalayas, spent 4 years there, the link of the mother still existing. I don't have much time, otherwise I would have gone into a little story about Shankara, but let's not do that now. Let me just say two sentences. The sannyasins are not supposed to go back and see their mother. They're not supposed to. It's not part of their dharma. You have left everything. You burnt your boats. But Shankara, when his mother was dying, went back, in spite of the fact that he knew he would be criticized by the orthodoxy. He went back. Not only did he go back, he was present at her funeral. And this is the sannyasin par excellence, there's no one who can be called a sannyasin who has written so much about Vedanta and the understanding of the truth. So if it hits this man who from the age of 12 has taken sannyas, has become a monk, a renunciant, and traveled when he passed away at the age of 30 or something, very young. Just imagine the hold that your mother has on your mind, not in a bad way. I mean the connection, the link. So once again, thank you very much for allowing me to be in this group. Thank you, Mohini, for inviting me here, and I wish you all the best for this book, Dear Mama. I hope many more people read the book and understand what Lily Charities is doing through studying about the mother. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you. Now the last and one of our very important speakers is Sunita Arora. So Sunita, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to echo everything that everyone said about Mohini. She's an incredible woman, and I think this book, for me especially, I've heard lots of people say that their mothers were a great inspiration. I know that in the book I've sort of penned my thoughts about my mother. I think it was very emotional for me to write about my mother. It also brought emotions of how I now treat my children and how what I want out of my life for my children. Just in a context, my mother was, I think, sort of out of her depth when my father married her, because my father was, he loved life. He was a bit of a playboy. He was sort of enjoyed life, to the full. But funnily enough, he had so many people who would want to marry him. But he went to a little village in Jalandhar, and the quietest, calmest person is who he chose as his wife. I don't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, because they were two sort of very indifferent people. My father loved life. My mother was solely sort of wanted to be a homemaker and sort of just be in the home. But she was then catapulted into a life where my father had a wealthy background. She had people working for her. She didn't really have to do much. But the situation sort of turned when she had to sort of face her sister-in-laws, the extended family. And to say to the least, she didn't really fit into much of the family. So she was always like depending on my father to sort of, not to sort of get her out of the problems, but, leaning on him more and more. But then suddenly we were sort of then put into this situation when I was born in Nairobi. I was only 2 years old. My sister was younger than me. And Idi Amin and Uganda sort of problems started, and we all had to leave Nairobi very quickly. Now, going from a very wealthy sort of background and having things done and everything, we were catapulted into London with nothing. So my mother was very uneducated. She didn't have anything that she could fall back on, but the lifestyle taught her that she had to. So my father had a professional job. He worked for Kenya Police, but when he came here, he went straight into New Scotland Yard and he got a very good job there. But my mother, again, was out of her depth again. So she didn't have anyone to lean on. But then she started to work in a factory. Then, she had to pay towards the mortgages and stuff. But I think what sort of was her vision for her children was that she sort of left us to sort of just fend for ourselves. And I think she became very detached from us in her life of wanting to sort of, build the home. But she forgot about sort of us as her children and how are we going to survive going from sort of this to that and being in English schools, trying to be in the Western sort of life. We wanted to be English. We wanted to be English girls, but my mum wanted us to be Punjabis and be the Punjab girls at home. So we were sort of in a little bit of a battle sort of with my mother that, we wanted to be cool and we wanted to be, the girls who could possibly sort of, have the boyfriends and have the, life outside. And, we didn't want to learn because my mother never really cared about us because she was uneducated. The problem was she never supported me or my sister to sort of want that career sort of buzz. For her, it was, okay, girls get married at 17, 18. I got married at 17, 18. Now, my daughters will do the same. So we sort of rebelled in the sense that we didn't want to do what she said, and we wanted to do what we wanted to do. So it was impossible to sort of win her, but she was quite strict. And I think that's where my story started, is when my mother sort of wanted her wish for me to get married at 18, which will be one of the biggest, I wouldn't say fallbacks of my life, but I feel that that's where my life could have gone further. I could have been something. I could have had a career. I could have been this professional woman in my own right, sort of who would have beaten this situation that my mother didn't have. But because she put an end to that, she wanted me to then be the homemaker and look after my mother-in-law, the extended family. She was trying to mirror exactly what she had in her life. But then I broke all tradition and I thought one thing in my life: I will never do this to my children. I will never let this happen to me. I am going to be that woman that my mother never let me be. I love my mother dearly, but my relationship with her is very bittersweet. Bittersweet into the sense that she didn't feel that my emotion and my career and my university was important to her because she didn't have it. But then I felt that she was being selfish to me because she didn't have it. She should have been that mother who supported and said, I didn't have this, you go to university and you do what makes you happy. And I think that will always live in my mind. And when I pen this letter, it might feel very harsh to someone who's reading extracts from the book. It's not, I don't love my mother. I love my mother dearly, like, I wouldn't wish anything on her. But I feel that there was part of something that she couldn't let go. And she stopped me from doing that, where I couldn't go any further. But then I did everything in my life, from working to studying to now, sort of building a huge sort of lifestyle for myself. And my children were educated to the top. So I made sure that everything I didn't have, my children had it. But today I can say that I fulfilled all my wishes. I have everything now. We have a huge business, which I've taken care of with my husband for over 20 years. I have now fulfilled the studying that I wanted to do. And when I met Mohini all those years ago, I think she started my love for children. When she said to me on that occasion, she said, I said, Mohini, I would like to do something for your charity. And she said one thing which I will never forget. She said, Sunita, I do lots of speeches and I do lots of things for Lily, but people listen to me, but then they don't do anything about it. And I said, Mohini, I don't want to be that one person. I want to do something. And we did our ball and we raised a lot of money for Lily, and we will continue doing that for you, for the incredible charity that you sort of run. And today we have our own Aurora Foundation, which has now helped many, many charities. Over 300 charities we've helped, and we've raised over £3 million. So in my heart, I'm fulfilled. I'm happy. I feel that I can understand my mother a little bit more now for what reasons she had in her life. I think my father was also, he was difficult because he loved life and he liked to he liked to have music in his life and have a dance. And my mother didn't want to do all those things. And she just felt, that he was always wanting the fun side of it and not being the serious side of it. So I think I take over with my father, that he's instilled all of that and I can carry on doing what he used to do in his life. And, we love our mum lots, but we encourage her now to break free from this Punjab woman. Even if you're nearly 80 now, Mum, you need to live a little bit. So I think I might crack it some point. But at the moment, my mother is still living in that cocoon, but we love her dearly. And I wanted to sort of make sure that I penned on the paper what I felt. I didn't want to sort of, sugarcoat it and say, no, I sort of just want to sort of say, my mother is amazing, my mother is this, my mother is that. I wanted people to know that there is mothers and daughters out there who do feel that their mother wasn't there for them and their mother wasn't there to support them. But in our lives, we learn something, because our learning is that we share that with our own daughters now. Whatever we didn't have, and it's installed into me, that I feel that, each one of my daughters can say that I let them do whatever made them happy. And today they are the happiest in their family, because their mother didn't want to interfere in their life. And she didn't want to put something there as a stumble to say, no, I'm going to control that side of you. So as much as I will say it, I've achieved what I wanted. I will go on achieving what I want, but my mother will still be there I love my mother, but unfortunately, I will never change my mother. So that's my mother. Thank you very much for letting us share a little bit of experience of our mothers.
No, I think, Sunita, it was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
To be able to show that you can love somebody without agreeing with him or her on everything.
Yes, and I'm still trying to convince her to do all the things that I want her to. And she said, no, I don't want to do this now, but one day I'll crack her.
There is a book called How to Parent Your Parents.
Maybe I'll give that to her.
The parents need to be taught about how to parent their children. And lots of parents need to be told they grew up in one generation, one level of technology, one level of moral values. Things have moved on. So how has the style of parenting changed?
That's the situation. Time has moved on. We have to move with the times.
Anybody, we want some intra-panel discussion as well. Would anyone like to comment on what Sunita or somebody or Anita or Navneet has said? Or you have? Let's talk amongst ourselves.
I would love to comment on Sunita's wonderful story. I didn't know all of this, so it's really nice to hear another perspective. What's beautiful is that you have changed that around in your life, in that you've given your children the opportunity to be an amazing role model, which you are, not just for your children, but for other women all over, in your giving, in your philanthropy, and your kindness, and and everything that you do. So I think that's incredible. And I think if you can change the narrative of how mothers are, we sometimes do have to become the mother of our mothers. I have an 88-year-old mother-in-law living with us, and I remember when I first, in my second marriage, when I married Avnish, I said to Mum, I'm going to do your makeup. You've been a widow for far too many years. And every event, every party we would have, I make sure she had a nice sari, nice jewelry, and lovely makeup on. And I felt that I was being a mum to her to say, bring out your beauty, your beautiful face, your gorgeousn't to the world. Let them see. Do not live in this paradigm of I'm a widow, so therefore I can't wear bright colors and I can't wear makeup. I was a widow for 3 years until I met Avnish. And I was a very young widow, but I said to my mother-in-law, I know what it's like. I know you feel being an Indian woman, because I myself am an Indian woman. If you think, what will people think of me? How will I be judged? Can I do this? Is this the right thing to do? And I think you've got to do what makes you feel great. So now Mum, my mother-in-law, who is, I call her my 88-year-old best friend because I have such a good time with her. And I just encourage all women just, to be themselves, and all these, constructs we have in society, they can be really debilitating and damaging. And I honor women who are widows, and to say, empower yourself, enrich your life, explore your life. And I encourage women to take on a new lease of life through personal development. And I'm happy to speak to any woman that wants to have that conversation. And I'm sure Mohini as well, you like me, you can guide women as well, and be a great role model as well as you, Sneeja. So, and all the men who are here, thank you for championing women as well for all of this.
I think we have to be mindful of the time, and I wanted to put a question to Shri M, because it arises out of my work with women over a very long time. I've done something or the other for almost 25 years now. But Shri M, in a country like India, where we glorify the Divine Mother, and I would like you to say something about how we approach the Divine Mother from different aspects, because there's Ma Lakshmi, Ma Saraswati, and yet at the same time, women are badly treated in a kind of parochial society. I mean, the largest number of children in brothels, in girls, is in India. So the complete contrast in our culture, where men get drunk and beat up the women, and where women sometimes, when they earn, also have no right over their earnings, where it's okay to, have a 4-year-old girl in a brothel, and yet we have the Devi, and yet we have Durga, because all the men failed in the war, so they created Durga. So what is this? Can you explain?
That's the wonderful hypocrisy that we practice. Let me put it straight. It's one thing to talk about glorifying the Divine Mother, and it is another thing to practically look after women. And somewhere people, have this psychological, I've given my offerings to the temple of Durga or Lakshmi, so everything is done. Then I come back home and do the same thing which everybody else is doing. Now, this is not what was intended in the tradition. It has changed now. So, I think we can't blame the ancient tradition of worshipping the mother for what's happening now. We need to be more practical and change, and simply don't harp on the idea that because I worship the Divine Mother, I can ill-treat women today in front of me. This is not going to work. So, we are somewhat, I am very sad to say, this is quite hypocritical in our life and approaches, and we need to open up and begin to think about how to bring about in practical life what we read in religious books and all these things. So, like for instance, there was this ancient custom of sati, where the woman walked in the fire and burnt herself. You see, look, it's time now that one doesn't glorify these things and begin to understand times have changed. And I don't know if the woman actually walked into the fire or was pushed in, we don't know. So, we need to be very practical on this, and you're right. It's like a very, you say one thing and you do another. You worship the Devi as the female aspect, then you ill-treat women. I mean, this is not going to work. And what can we do about it? Well, people like me and also young people have begun to rebel against this and change things. So it will happen. I think it should happen. I think Lord Dholakia has some point. He was raising his finger just now.
I'm just going to ask you one other question, because what I've noticed, belonging to a large number of charities, that substantial number of decisions about women are being taken by men. And what the essential part of it is, how do we empower women to be able to look at their own destiny rather than other people doing for it? That is the point I want to make, because I travel across the world in terms of number of charities. I belong to Save the Children Fund. I belong to the Plan International. I belong to Street Children in India, etc. And every time I have seen, it's always been the men influencing the position of women. And that is something that needs to be changed. And if you all belong to some of these charities or contribute towards some of these charities and lift the fingers of people, because we tend to forget one of the most lucrative trade at the moment is about human trafficking, more than drugs. But we tend to be very, very cautious in the way we take decisions. Only in UK this week we are dealing with a situation about dealing with abuse against women, sort of thing. This sort of legislation effectively help. But what we need to do to make sure that women are at the center of this decision-making process.
So are you, sorry, may I ask, are you saying that all charities should rather be run on by women, taken over by women?
I believe that the charity that I belong to, I have seen women contribute far more onto that one. But every decision-making process, we got to ask ourselves that dimension of women, where women should be able to take part on that one, and we should be assisting in taking it forward. That is what I'm making.
I wish this is taken to the government in this country also, and put before the powers that be and say, look, this is how things are. Can we change this?
Women are not passive objects. Important is women should not be treated in terms of charity. They should not be treated as objects of charity or simply as objects of other people's concern. They have their own sense of agency, and they can creatively design the programs they need, make their own input.
It's a question of power, and it's very hard for men to give up power because they have wielded it for God knows 5,000 years. And it's the women's project is only about 50 years old if you take it from Women's Lib. And it's very patchy all over the world, because one extreme example is probably Afghanistan. In Britain, the men have given up with much better grace. Indian men are confused because we have all these Khap Panchayats in Haryana. We've got Kerala, which is a matriarchal system, but generally it's a very parochial and patriarchal society, and the men just don't want to give up the power.
May I say something? Because I'm from Kerala. I was born and brought up in Trivandrum. I go to Kerala very often. I have a lot of interest there. I know people from the man who rules the state to down, everybody. I must say that this matriarchal system which you talked about is hardly has had any effect on the way men treat the women. I'm sorry to say this. The general Kerala male is so masochistic. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. He doesn't care what the woman is saying. I'm being open about it. There are some women who have rebelled against it, but there's hardly in, but you can count them on the fingers of your hand. I mean, that's how things are. So this matriarchal system, and also sometime I'll explain to you what this matriarchal system is all about. Let's not get into that, but even there things have to change. In spite of many years of communist rule, where they're supposed to break all these things, right? What about Bengal, West Bengal? How many years, 30 years of communist rule? Do you think there's much change that people look after women or take care of women are given more independence? I'm not talking about the present Chief Minister of West Bengal, I'm talking in general. So, these things are, you are right, as pointed out, we need to look at this very carefully and try to do something. And it's the young who can do things more than us. I'm 72 now. The young people should understand.
You're still a young man compared to Navneet and
But what I mean, well, because of constant practice of yoga, well, I don't have any of the, except my gray hair or perhaps and a few wrinkles, I'm okay. But
it's one idea I want you to think about. We have been talking about the woman.
About?
We started talking about the mother. From the mother, we started talking about the woman. Now, you can't be a mother unless you are a woman. Fair enough.
Absolutely.
But the point is, woman can appear in many forms. As a young daughter, as a wife, as a mother, as a grandmother. At different stages in life, she is perceived differently.
Yes.
As a daughter, she is somebody whom I can dominate, decide who she should marry, and so on. As a wife, I might respect her, but up to a point. As a mother, she becomes an object of reverence. So when you say the same person who treated woman as a daughter in one way treats mother or grandmother differently, what is the attitude to woman in that society? So the woman is an abstraction, is a construct. It has been broken down into woman as a daughter, woman as this, woman as grandmother. Now I grew up in a family, for example, where woman is mother, was an object of reverence. Woman is daughter of somebody whose future you can dispose of the way you want to. So how is the woman treated in that family?
I don't know.
One level is an object of power, and another level is an object of charity.
If anyone else has an answer to this, I mean, who can?
I think, Rumi, you've been very quiet.
No, I'm listening. I find it fascinating. But I think
because point was very important one. But the difference is this, that when I became at the age of about 16, 17, at that particular stage, my mother became my best friend, more than a mother, the best friend to whom I could go, seek advice, talk about issues, and she would be big enough to be able to talk issues with me and had no problem, no difficulty at all. So that relationship changed continuously as she moves forward and as we move forward in our age, etc. So that to me was a very important aspect of growing up process.
Three of us are from Punjab. Sorry, Rumi, you were going to say something. You first.
Lord Words, you want to say something? I would like him to say something.
I echo what you said, Mohini. Ultimately, the role of women in society, it's a question of power. And people in power give up power it's very hard for people in power to give up power. But, I think it is so important, again, in your forward or in your book, you said if we want peace in the world and if we want non-violence in the world, then we have to have more women in power. And, that's so obvious when you think about it. So I think we have to continue this battle and respect and promote more women in leadership roles and accept that this is a question of power, and it's very hard to give up that power for the patriarchal society.
Well, as I was saying, three of us are from Punjab, and we're in the Jat society. The woman used to walk sort of, 6 paces or 6 feet behind the men, never together. I mean, that's another indication of where you stand.
But you know what? In Afghanistan, women used to walk 10 feet behind men. Americans keep telling them to walk in front. They won't. And suddenly one day they found that they were walking in front. And they said, what has brought about the change? And he said, where are the mines? We want women to go first. Because they have mines in the roads. So
women have less value, so let them be grown up with the landmines.
They have the landmines.
Terrible, and there was a doctor.
There
was a doctor who said that his wife walked behind him, because behind every successful man there is a persistent wife.
There is also this other thing. Behind every great man there is a woman, and behind the woman is his wife.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things to think about, which I perceived in my own family, in other people's families, you talk about a mother, but a mother is also a wife to somebody. She is also a daughter to somebody. She is a sister-in-law to somebody. A woman has to negotiate many different roles. So as a mother, she would like to treat me one way, but she also has to balance it against her relation to her own husband. So if husband is dominant and then she feels crushed, she might want to use me to make sure, her son, to make sure that the husband's power is balanced. So her relation to her son becomes slightly different because of the desire to balance it against the relation to her husband. So I think the mother's place in a family has to be constantly negotiating in the context of her relations with others. And what emerges from that negotiation varies from family to family. Because in different families, there are different dynamics between husband and wife, mother and son, and so on. But anyway, we are remarkably, it's 12:45, exactly the time we are supposed to stop, but we can go on. I find it
I just want to add one thing,
Please.
that even Swami Vivekananda, India as a country also has very bad karma for the way it has treated its women. So I think that's something we need to update and look at.
Right. Well, look, are we bringing the meeting to a close? Well, if we are, then there's two remarks. First of all, you have been a wonderful group of people. I couldn't hope for a better panel. Wonderful discussion. Everybody made some fascinating contribution. Very moving one from Navneet, from Lord Virgin. I hadn't heard about this. Deeply moving. You could almost cry. And when Navneet talks about the mother's thumb mark on a passport as memory, these are very moving things. And plus, you also write about how she used to read, she used to ask you to read from Bhagavad Gita and Ramayana and Mahabharata, and that's how you picked up bits of culture and story, or Sunitaji, or Ramadan. And these stories are absolutely wonderful. So you need to do part 2, which is Letters to Mama, part 2, based on part 1. You have an industry now, and I'm sure one of our rich panelists can support you if necessary, which is at least 4 volumes are there waiting to be born.
God,
Dear Mama can be Dear Mama part 2, Dear Mama part 3. Then it could be Dear Papa, although you will have to hear the word Papa and Mama. I think the words should be more recognizable to the Indian. And I have never called my mother Mama. It's Mummy or Ba or Ma or whatever. Dear Mom. Similarly, a letter, mother writing to a son from the other part of the planet, writing saying, "What have you done to yourself? When I raised you and gave birth to you, this is what I expected of you. And now, you, my dear Donald Trump, you have become a rascal, a burden on earth." It's quite an industry. And I think Lord Virji or Sumitaraji, you can take a patent in it. So whoever wants to write a book of this kind, patent will be given. Anyway, absolutely wonderful.
Can I say something about the book a little bit? I don't know if you can hear me, because the sales of the book will actually, all the money will go towards education projects in free schools that we support through our charity. Is the only way to empower women, because they'll be a little less lost and a little less vulnerable to trafficking if they're educated. So all that money is going, and that 2020, last year, the charity we concentrated on our food fund to feed the hungry because of the crisis. This year it's education, because these free schools are also struggling. And it's very important for these children who have generations of illiteracy behind them to not have a break in their education.
Well done.
No, Lily Foundation, some of us here are patrons of Lily Foundation.
Yes.
All of us have an interest in the activities of Lily Foundation, and we wish it well. And I hope more and more people would buy the book. And I don't think I should mention this, but whoever funded the production of the book deserves thanks.
That's very naughty of you.
You are giving the game away. I didn't hear a word about it. And one last story, when Bertrand Russell was asked, he said, what is the difference between a mother and a father? He said, motherhood is a fact. Fatherhood is an inference. He's a guess. That so-and-so is my mother can be empirically proven. Father, well, I mean, he says he's my father. It's an inference. So the difference between a fact and a guesswork is motherhood is a fact. Fatherhood is a guesswork, which may be true, which may not be true. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. Really absolutely splendid.
Thank you.
When we have the next panel,
Thank you.
we'll all be there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.